There is a specific kind of fear that settles in when you realize there is no one coming. Not later, not eventually, not after one more attempt or one more explanation. It's the fear that arrives when the silence stretches too long and you understand without drama that support is not delayed, it is absent. And that realization doesn't just affect your plans. It reaches deeper than strategy. Something destabilizing happens at the identity level before you have time to frame it as motivation or discipline. You begin to feel exposed in a way that has nothing to do with money itself, and everything to do with what the lack of it reveals. Because when resources disappear, so do buffers. You are no longer protected by margin. Every decision feels heavier. Every mistake feels permanent. And slowly, almost invisibly, your sense of self begins to reorganize around avoidance rather than pursuit. You stop asking what you want and start asking what you can afford to risk losing. You stop imagining expansion and begin calculating survival. Not consciously at first. It happens before intention has a chance to intervene. Before effort enters the picture, something else has already taken over. What looks like practicality becomes something sharper. Restraint stops being wisdom and starts functioning as preemptive humiliation. You learn to keep your expectations low not because you are realistic, but because disappointment has become too expensive. And the most dangerous part is that this adjustment feels intelligent. It feels mature. It feels like you are adapting. But being predictable has already cost you something: leverage, dignity, the freedom to exist without constant self-justification. You begin to move through the world smaller than necessary, not because you lack ambition, but because visibility has become a liability. Machiavelli understood this unsentimental truth long before modern language softened it. When you are exposed, power does not need to be taken from you, it simply stops being offered. People respond to certainty, not need, to presence, not explanation. And when scarcity presses in long enough, you don't just lack support, you begin to signal that lack without realizing it. Your decisions tighten, your posture changes, your willingness to wait replaces your willingness to initiate. What feels like patience is often just delayed permission. And this is where most people misunderstand what succeeding with zero support actually demands. They believe the threat is external: competition, systems, unfairness. But the real danger appears earlier than all of that. It appears in the quiet ways scarcity trains you to become easier to predict, easier to position, easier to ignore. And once that shift happens, effort alone cannot undo it. Because the problem is no longer what you're trying to do. It's what has already been decided about you before you ever begin. When support is absent long enough, it stops feeling like a temporary disadvantage and starts behaving like an environment. This is where most people make their first mistake. They continue to think of scarcity as a situation they are in, rather than a condition they are being shaped by. But environments do not wait for your permission. They train you quietly, repeatedly, through exposure. And scarcity is especially efficient at this because it does not argue. It simply applies pressure until certain responses disappear. You don't wake up one day deciding to think smaller. You wake up already doing it. Your body learns first. It learns to scan for threat instead of opportunity, to preserve energy instead of risking momentum, to value certainty over possibility. This happens below language, below conscious intention. You begin to hesitate not because you are afraid of failure, but because hesitation has been rewarded with safety. The absence of immediate damage confirms the adjustment. Relief arrives early, long before reflection has a chance to intervene, and that relief teaches you what works. Not what is true, not what is possible, just what reduces pressure fastest. Over time, this conditioning begins to look like character. You tell yourself you are being realistic, grounded, responsible. In reality, you are becoming calibrated. Calibrated to expect less, ask for less, move less, reveal less. This is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is an intelligent response to prolonged exposure without margin. But intelligence under constraint does not aim upward. It aims inward. It compresses. And once that compression sets in, you begin organizing your entire life around not needing help, not drawing attention, not creating situations where refusal would hurt too much. Independence becomes a shield, not a strength. Self-reliance becomes isolation disguised as maturity. Machiavelli observed that people adapt their behavior to the rewards and punishments of their environment long before they understand the rules of the game. Scarcity teaches you the rules by repetition. It teaches you that asking is costly, that visibility attracts judgment, that initiative invites exposure. And slowly, without drama, you begin preempting rejection by narrowing yourself first. This is how scarcity becomes internal, not as panic but as posture, not as despair but as containment. The danger is not that you fail under these conditions. The danger is that you function, you survive. You become efficient at operating inside limits you did not consciously choose. And the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to tell where adaptation ends and identity begins. At some point, you are no longer responding to scarcity. You are embodying it. And once that happens, effort feels strangely ineffective, not because you lack discipline, but because discipline is now being deployed inside a structure that was built to prevent forward motion in the first place. That is the moment most people misinterpret as personal inadequacy. They think they need more will, more confidence, more intensity. They don't yet see the deeper problem. They don't see that the system shaping them is already one step ahead, because it learned how to keep them contained long before they learned how to push back. What most people never realize is that the structure shaping them is not powerful because it is true, but because it is early. Scarcity conditioning does not rely on convincing you of anything. It relies on arriving before experience has a chance to contradict it. It organizes your response in advance, compressing time so that by the moment choice appears, the decision has already been made. This is why effort feels strangely late. Motivation shows up after hesitation. Courage arrives after avoidance. Discipline appears once the sequence has already passed its point of influence. The system works because it controls the order of operations. Anticipation comes first. Contact comes second. And anticipation, once established, does not correct itself. It has no feedback mechanism. It grows in isolation, feeding on imagined consequences, rehearsed losses, projected humiliation. Reality, by contrast, always corrects, but correction requires contact. And contact is the one variable scarcity conditioning works hardest to delay. This is why the weight is always heaviest before action, not after. The imagined cost is consistently worse than the lived one, but imagination arrives earlier, louder, and more persistently. Over time, this trains you to trust anticipation more than experience. You begin making decisions based on what you expect to happen, not what actually happens. And because expectation is never tested, it never collapses. It only tightens. This is the hidden fragility in the system. It depends on a very specific distortion of timing, but this fragility is not something you can exploit deliberately. The moment you try to use it, the system adapts. One instance of deviation can be dismissed as an exception. A pattern cannot. Patterns introduce evidence. Evidence threatens prediction, and prediction is the foundation this entire structure rests on. This is why repetition feels dangerous at an identity level. Not because it is difficult, but because it destabilizes the story you have been living inside. And so the system intervenes earlier and earlier, increasing vigilance, increasing rehearsal, increasing internal commentary. Awareness does not interrupt this process. It often intensifies it. Once you see the sequence, you start watching yourself move through it. You monitor hesitation. You track reactions. You try to manage timing consciously. But management arrives too late. It always does. Discipline is deployed after anticipation has already reorganized your nervous system. Insight becomes oversight. Observation becomes surveillance. And now the pressure doubles because you are not only anticipating consequences, you are anticipating your own failure to respond correctly. This is why understanding does not feel like relief. It feels heavier. You are now aware of the system but still operating inside it. You can see the weakness, but you cannot touch it through force, insight, or planning. The instability is real, but it is not accessible at the level of effort. And until that becomes clear, most people keep doing the same thing, trying harder, refining control, tightening management, never noticing that each attempt arrives too late in the sequence to matter. The system does not win because it is strong. It wins because it moves first. And as long as it continues to arrive before experience, it will continue to feel invincible, even when it isn't. Once this structure has been seen, something subtle but decisive happens. It does not weaken, it recalibrates. Scarcity conditioning is not threatened by awareness because awareness does not arrive outside of it. Awareness is absorbed. What was once automatic becomes deliberate, and that deliberateness is mistaken for progress. You tell yourself you are being careful now, intentional, responsible, but what has really happened is that vigilance has replaced reflex. The system has learned to operate with supervision. Every pause is monitored. Every impulse is evaluated. Every deviation is assessed for risk before it has a chance to complete itself. This feels like maturity. It feels like self-control. It feels like growth. But it is not freedom. It is optimization under constraint. The pressure has simply moved inward. Where fear once acted quickly, management now acts constantly. The most effective adaptation happens around repetition. One exception can be tolerated. A pattern cannot. Patterns generate evidence, and evidence threatens the predictive order the system depends on. So the system tightens its grip around consistency. It begins to frame deviation as irresponsibility rather than risk. You don't just hesitate because something might go wrong. You hesitate because repeating the deviation would require you to carry a new identity forward. And identity is heavier than outcome. This is where awareness becomes surveillance. You begin watching yourself watch yourself. You monitor tone, timing, posture, decisions. You pre-correct behavior before it can be expressed. What once felt like instinct now feels like responsibility. Not because the stakes increased, but because control replaced contact. And control is heavy, heavier than fear ever was. Fear flares and passes. Control lingers. It demands constant attention. This is why so many people who figure it out feel more constrained, not less. Insight didn't free them. It upgraded the system. Scarcity conditioning does not collapse when its weakness is exposed. It adapts by relocating pressure from anticipation of outcome to anticipation of self-management. You are no longer just afraid of what might happen. You are afraid of managing it incorrectly, of responding poorly, of proving that you are still limited. This is how the trap deepens without appearing to close. You are functioning. You are stable. You are surviving. And because nothing is visibly wrong, the system appears justified. But something essential has shifted. Effort is no longer directed outward. It is turned inward, maintaining alignment with a structure that no longer needs to threaten you overtly. Machiavelli understood this dynamic clearly. Power does not disappear when it is challenged. It relocates. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, more internal. The system no longer needs to restrict you directly. You do it for it. And this is the most dangerous stage because nothing feels broken enough to demand interruption. Control feels safer than risk. Monitoring feels wiser than contact. And so the final illusion settles in, that managing yourself carefully is the same as moving freely. It isn't. It's just the last place pressure hides before it becomes invisible. And until that pressure loses its urgency entirely, most people never realize they are still living ahead of their own lives, rehearsing responses to events that haven't happened yet, maintaining a system that no longer needs to enforce itself.